Our first wonderful speaker is Eva Selhub. She is a doctor in the field of integrative medicine and mind-body medicine. She's a former instructor at Harvard and currently is an associate scientist at Tufts, a physician, author, speaker, consultant, and has written 2 relevant books for today, Your Health Destiny and The Love Response. I give you Eva Selhub.
There we go. Isn't she cute? So, you know, it's really lovely to be with all of you and all the panelists who have so many inputs on what love is. And ultimately, we each have a personal experience of love, and which is what made us go on the search of discovering what it is and how do I use it and how can I bring it into the world. And so I want to, you know, I come from it from a physician's point of view. I also come from a daughter, a friend, you know, a human being point of view. And so, to give you sort of how I view love, and welcome to hear how you view love and how we can sort of coalesce our views together, is to give you the personal journey of what led me there. As most people say, well, you know, you're a physician, I worked in primary care, you know, I did the whole sort of regimen of internal medicine. How'd you get to talking about love? And you're quite brave, by the way, for bringing this into the medical community. And so, you know, I say, well, you know, it's sort of you have to sort of suffer, right? I think someone said that in order to get, you know, people to pay attention, they have to suffer first. And, you know, we sort of have to appeal to our sort of narcissistic desire to feel better in order for us to then search for meaning, you know, which Viktor Frankl's work in Man's Search for Meaning. And for me, you know, I was on this track to be this, you know, doctor, you know, go save lives, whatever it is where we have this illusion of thinking that we're going to be. And, you know, I was stuck with an HIV needle back in 1996. And this is before we knew what to do. This is when people died horrible deaths from HIV. My hospital had, you know, 70% of people with HIV who died horrible deaths. I had a really bad exposure. It wasn't just a simple little needle prick. It was a big blood-filled needle stick. And I really sort of had that, you know, what am I doing with my life? I thought I was going to die. And I remember when the attending on call said that there was a study coming out from NIH about going on a bunch of medications after exposure. And, you know, we want you on it because it's a really bad exposure. You know, what do you think went through my mind? Right? What do you think I cried about most? What do you think? Do you think it was about dying? I'm going to give you that answer because I only have 15 minutes. But my fear was that I was going to die alone and unloved. That I wasn't married yet, and I hadn't met my partner, and then who's going to love me now? That was what sent me into absolute despair. And also the fact that I owed so much money for my medical school loans, my parents co-signed, and I was going to leave them with a big bill. So the guilt was overwhelming. But the sent me into absolute despair that I cried about every night was that I was going to die unloved, alone. And 6 weeks of this terrible medication that made me sicker than I've ever been before. My hematocrit dropped, I was anemic, I was profoundly fatigued, I had abdominal pains. But you know what happened during that time? People rallied. My colleagues rallied, my family rallied, my friends rallied. Nobody let me be alone. Every time I had to go in for a blood test, somebody came with me. And I was realizing, what am I doing? I was going to go into pulmonary medicine and really work in ICUs, which is where this incident happened. And I thought to myself, what are you doing? First of all, you know, in this country, the way people die is so undignified and without love. That is a problem right there. But why am I not teaching people how to be alive rather than keep people alive? There's a problem there. Why am I doing? So I had sort of like, I'm going to change my life and I'm going to do something else and I don't ever want to do that procedure ever again. And so I changed the course of my career and I decided to follow a midwife around and start learning about people and life. But then my dog died and my grandfather died and then I was being harassed and then my father had a heart attack and then my apartment burned down and I lost all my worldly possessions all in 5 months. And I became profoundly depressed. And I kept saying, why me? And I kept all that time saying, well, I'm going to do better. And by the way, during that 6 weeks, I did my bargaining. If you let me live, I promise I'll be a better person. As if I was so bad. And I kept saying, why me? Why me? What did I do wrong? I work so hard. I'm a good person. Why me? And my friend, maybe it was probably about a year from needle stick until when there was an intervention by one of my dear friends, and she said, we want you back. Where have you been? You haven't smiled. You haven't found joy. We want you back. And I sort of kind of woke up and I said, here I am saying, why me? Feeling like a victim, as if I'm unloved and all alone, but that's so untrue. Nobody's left my side, even though I'm miserable to be around. My colleagues put a fund together to support me so I could buy some furniture. And I thought, it's not true that I'm not loved. So why am I walking around with this belief system that I'm all alone and I'm not loved? Where does that come from? I said, nature just as soon lets a forest fire burn as a flower bloom. It's got nothing to do with whether or not I'm loved or not. It's just life. Life is stressful. Shit happens. How you deal with it is something else. And what helps you deal with it are the people that love you. What helps you to deal with it is your own knowledge of your worthiness, that you have it. I got this, to handle it. What helps you to handle it is the belief that you belong to something so much bigger that there might be a reason for things that you don't have to understand, but it's there. So that's what I said I need to change. I need to figure out something. And I started working with the Mind-Body Medical Institute to learn about stress and mind-body medicine, develop an understanding of stress physiology and the clinical application, which I'm not going to talk about today. But I started saying, wow, and starting to study Eastern traditions. And then this thing happened in 2002. My niece was born. That beautiful little girl who's now 14, by the way. And I was part of the labor and delivery team. So I got to take her out. Now, have you seen a newborn right out of the womb? Not so pretty. Bloody mess. But to me, it was the most incredible thing I'd ever witnessed. You know that feeling when time just stands still? That's what it was. And I was under a lot of stress. I was a primary care doctor. I hated every minute. They were going to, slash my salary. They're asking me to see 30 people a day. I was losing my empathy. I was starting to look at my patients as numbers, and I hated every minute. I was having anxiety attacks. Again, I was feeling all alone. But in that moment, everything was going to be okay. In that moment, time stood still, and I felt like I was the breath of life, and that I could handle anything. And I thought to myself, what is that? Because I sometimes feel like that when I meditate. So that's when I started looking into love. What is that? And there it was, one of my colleagues in Germany had written a paper on the neurobiology of love. And there it was. It's the same physiology as meditation. Same physiology. And I said, whoa, you mean if I tap into that, I don't have to meditate for as long? If I can bring love into the equation, then I can just bring it into my life rather than going out of my life to meditate. I can bring the meditative state into my life. Cool. So that's how my journey began, into really looking into this and to finding out what is it? Is it emotion? Is it a feeling? Is it romantic? What is it? Or is it all of these things? And do all of these things have a common component? And as Barbara Fredrickson said, it represents a fusion of specific positive emotions, including interest, joy, and contentment. So it's representative. It's represented by our emotions, right? But it changes according to context. It could be platonic. It could be romantic. It could be altruistic. It could be familial. It's like H2O, right? It's still H2O, but it takes on different forms depending on context and environment. In a hot or cold environment, whether you put it in a bottle or it's on the ground or it's vapor, it's still H2O. But it has a different effect, right? A different purpose, a different context, a different environment. Love is the same way. It's an energy, isn't it? That takes on different forms depending on how it's utilized, depending on where you put it, depending on how it's presented. It takes on different form, but at the end of the day, can it be separated? Because the physiology ends up being very similar. the reward systems in the brain and the hormones and neurochemicals and neurotransmitters that are then elicited through the body, and then what actually happens to the physical body. That's very similar. So can we separate one from the other, or can we just say that it has different levels or different intensities? But in one, and it's an energy, right? So I started looking at, well, what is energy? So I was studying Chinese medicine and Qigong and trying to understand what wisdom traditions have been saying, the Vedic traditions, how they describe energy as life force. Yes, love is life force, isn't it? Because the lack of love or the absence of love is death. So ultimately, as human beings, we all want to have life force. But yet that life force, as you describe, seeps out of us every day as we give it away rather than regenerate it. So do we only regenerate, not give? Do we only exhale and not inhale? No, we do both. Life force, chi, is about that circulation, right? Life force is love. It's our life force. It's our nourishment, just like food and exercise and all these things. But it takes on different forms and how we nourish it. So sometimes I want, a pear, and sometimes I want, a grape. It's still nourishment, but comes in its different forms, in different contexts, and different environment. But in the end, it might be having the same effect. So I've broken it down to the love pyramid. This is all in the love response, by the way. So we come in, and we come into this world where there's these pure, open hearts, innocent and pure. We don't know much other than what our genetic information is coming in. We don't know what a self is. So how do we learn what a self is? Well, you don't know an apple's an apple until somebody tells you it's an apple. So how do you know what self is until you're brought up in an environment that says this is self? But oftentimes that environment, mitigated by culture or society, is giving you the wrong impression of self, as you're bad versus you're good. That I love you simply because you exist, not because you follow what I say you should do. And so we grow up that confusion, but true social love is a love given and received from others, to pets. That love that is a circle of love that is repeated, that's letting us know that we're part of a continuum of a life force that we do together. And that then lets us know who we are, to lead us into that self-love. Now, if I'm brought up to know that I am a loving, worthy being, I'm definitely going to take care of myself, aren't I? The fuel that I choose to put into my body or to surround myself with is going to be nurturing. It's like saying, well, I don't really love this plant, so I'm not going to water it. But that's what we do, don't we? If I loved myself, would I? And that's the question I have everybody ask. If I loved myself, would I put this food into my body? Would I be showering in coffee versus water? Would I be surrounding myself with this person? If I loved myself enough, would I? Because I wouldn't do this to my best friend, and I wouldn't do this to this plant that I nurture. But yet, I'm not doing that for myself. Why? Right? So where's that paradigm shift needs to happen for that self-love? And then ultimately, as we start going through those layers of the 1 to 1 plus 2, and we start going into 2 plus 3 equals 10, into that exponential time-space continuum, into that belief that I profoundly belong to something larger than self, we get to spiritual love. And that transcends everything, because that lets us heal that self and that social, because we know that I'm loved simply because I exist. And we have that spiritual love just by being in nature, the spiritual love from a religious belief system. It's that profound belief that I'm one rather than I am only one. In the oneness versus the self that's alone. Okay? So that's how I put it that way. But when you look at the physiology, though, it's similar for all three when it comes down to it. It's that feeling that I am enough and I have enough, come what may, I will have what I need. It's the knowing that life is hard. It always will be. That the vibration that is the opposite to love is that of fear and stress. And that will always be there, and you know what? You need it. Because if you're going to be a human being rather than a spiritual being, but a spiritual being in a human body, you need your fight or flight response to let you know when you're hungry or when there's an intruder or when you need to walk away. You need that signaling system. Life is hard. It's going to be. But what allows you to know that you're going to be okay despite uncertainty? What allows you to live with ambiguity? What allows you to deal with the unknown is love, because it's so pleasurable, it's so wonderful, you say it's worth it. This hardship, this suffering, it's worth it because the end game is so good. right? And you're built that way. That's the physiology. It feels good. That's why we mate, and that's why we have babies, and that's why we go out in nature, and that's why we want to keep this earth as it is, because it makes us feel good. Oh, we have 1 minute? Oh, my goodness. Ah! All right, I'm skipping through because I want to take you into the experience of love. And I'm just going to say that I want to give a mention to the physiology, which I keep saying is the same. The neurobiology of the dopaminergic reward system, the morphine-like substances, and oxytocin is really big, and it lowers that stress response, reduces anxiety, allows us to want to reproduce. And by the way, without it, we wouldn't reproduce. We wouldn't be a species. There's a biological reason we have love, all right? Because as a species, we would never exist because we have a long gestational period of 9 months and a long maturation period of 15 years or so before we can be on our own. So it's imperative, not us, but our ancestors that lived in the wilderness, that a woman bonded with her infant and the husband bonded with the family. And there has to be a mechanism that's strong enough, that's pleasurable enough to want to go back for more. And that comes from oxytocin, because without it, the men would be spreading their sperm far and wide and not stick around, and some do. You know that. But what I find to be actually more funny, of myself, is that women would be a lot more selective than we are. And that's oxytocin. It makes us trust. It makes us stupid. Because if we were that selective, we would never mate, because nobody would be good enough. So we have to have this thing that causes us to fall in love because it feels so good. Again, there's a biological reason to it, and it's a beautiful one. So, this idea of isolation, versus connection, I versus we, it's a duality that we're going to live in because we are in a human body. So there is a separate, there is a self, but there's also a we, and it's being able to transcend that, to access that love, and how do we do it? So I'm going to give you a how-to before we end, and we'll take a couple minutes more, and then I'm handing it over to Jean, who's going to blow you out of this world. And what I call this is the love response, is that physiology that counterbalances stress and fear. And so I'm going to have you do this exercise with me as you witness. If you can close your eyes, or you can keep your eyes open if you like. And I'm just going to start off with putting you into a place of thinking about something that's stressful, and thinking about something that might cause you worry or anger or frustration or fear, allowing that to be there because it's just part of our lives. And acknowledge how it's making your body feel. So maybe pay attention to your chest, particularly your heart center, whether it feels open or closed, relaxed or tight, heavy or light. And notice your breath. Just being aware. Maybe your shoulders or your mind or your stomach, like Stefan had us do earlier today. Just notice how that stressful experience makes you feel. Consciously being aware that we may not be able to control our environment, but we can control and choose how we feel. We can redirect that feeling to be able to deal with our uncertainty better. And we have access to that by calling out for a shield to help us. And so if you want in your own mind, imagine that you're calling out for a shield to help you. And as you do, you will begin to notice golden rays of light from the heavens above shining down upon you. These are golden rays of light full of unconditional love, grace, and wisdom that surround you like a mother holds her infant, letting you know that you're safe, loved, and held. Creating a space of generosity all around you, giving you the opportunity to just slow down and honor the way you feel. To know that you have every right to feel whatever it is you're feeling, to allow yourself to inhale as deeply as you can and exhale as completely as you can. Inhaling as if you're inhaling the breath of life, and exhaling, just letting go of anything and everything you wish to let go of. Allowing the mind and body to become a little quieter so that you can listen. In what way the situation is making me feel that I'm not enough. And then decide to change that story. Saying the words, I am enough, I have enough, I have all that I need, come what may, I have all that I need. As you say those words, the light will move into your entire body, especially into your heart. I am enough, I have enough, I have all that I need, come what may, I have all that I need. Golden rays of light full of unconditional love and grace fill your heart, relaxing your heart so that it opens like the flower that it is, the full breath of life. The light inside of your heart shining out and connecting to other hearts, aligning you with the heart of the universe and all there is. I am enough, I have enough, I have all that I need, come what may. I have all that I need. And just pay attention to how that makes you feel. Noticing your heart, your breath, taking your time to come back, opening your eyes when you're ready. Don't I look more beautiful now?